Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. It's my greatest pleasure to welcome you to today's Refinitiv Perspectives Lives. My name is Trang, and I will be your host today. Before we begin, I just wanted to introduce the audience poll for today, which is looking at what programming languages you use or are familiar with. We've asked the same question of our social media followers earlier this week, so it'll be quite interesting to see what the results are today and to get the insights of our speakers as well. As usual, you can just scan the QR code that you will see on screen now or click on the link provided in the chat to get to the question, and I encourage you all to participate. The incredible speed at which data is being generated and consumed and the global scope of its application has created an immense need to leverage technology to decipher it at pace. This has propelled coding languages that allow for more advanced financial analysis into the spotlight. Markets are being transformed by financial coders who rely on scripting to automate daily routines. In addition, the use of APIs has presented a world of opportunities to financial institutions, allowing firms to more easily access and exchange information between applications and to drive the digitalization of their products and services. The research consultancy firm Optimus predicts that by 2030, 400,000 jobs in capital markets will be lost to technology. At the same time, 66,000 new jobs will be created in the sector, mostly in technology and data science. So it's no surprise that demand in the sector for those with both a financial and technical skill set is really on the rise. So today's live stream will hone in on these trends, discuss the benefits of APIs and coding languages in finance, and provide you with some practical tips on how to get started in coding. So if you have any questions, I encourage you all to pop them in the chat, and we'll try to answer as many as possible. And with that, I would like to welcome our two speakers today, Toby Amis, Head of Developer Workflows for Refinitiv, and Leonid Sopotnitskiy, Director of Open Desktop Architecture at Refinitiv. Thank you both for joining us today.
Good evening, afternoon.
Hello.
So I guess you've both been in the financial services sector for many, many years. As a scene-setting question, I just wanted to find out what big shifts or transformational trends do you find most interesting recently? And I guess perhaps, Toby, we could start with you and then move on to Leonid.
Yeah, there have been a number over this. I guess I've been in financial markets now around 25 years, first 3 years trading foreign exchange. There are a number of trends which I find really interesting. I mean, one of them is, I guess, the emergence of real innovation within the consumer space, and that outstripping the kind of technology innovation we see in banking, whereby users these days expect the same kind of ease of use and innovation in their professional lives as they have in their consumer lives. So that was been a real interesting one. I think electronification is really interesting and kind of hones in on this conversation as well. The move of markets to be traded on electronic systems necessitates harnessing technology and coding, etc. Obviously, regulations has been a really huge shift for us, and again leads into companies needing to leverage technology ever more as a means for revenue generation as margins get squeezed. Huge rise in data. There is certainly when I was first in the markets, we were hungry for more data, and it now seems the challenge is to find the data that matters, to screen out the data. And I think really leading into today's conversation is a real huge pace in technology democracy, I call it, whereby technology just becomes ever more available to professionals who aren't necessarily professional developers. So the rise of bankers who can code, traders, research analysts, portfolio managers who are harnessing what are relatively simple scripting language to do much more powerful off-desktop compute, leveraging from cloud and the simplicity of the syntax itself. So they're kind of the sort of, I guess, the 4 or 5 broad themes that I see that have really impacted our business models and the business models of our customers over the last 20 years, really. Leonid, you think?
Yes, I agree, Toby. And I myself, I've also been a quant at a hedge fund, and the way that we've used to work with data was also entirely different from what possibilities exist today. Like back in those days, we would only wish that vendors like Refinitiv or others would have APIs that would really make it very easy to access the data. And we would need to figure out how do we integrate different feeds and build out our trading strategies on the back of that. Today, it's all so democratized that really anybody, not necessarily even a quant, can just get easy access to the market data that used to be just withheld from the, I would say, the general public before, and start coding and start backtesting different strategies. There are different platforms that exist today that offer such opportunities. Some of them are free of charge. The others would really also offer maybe even more information than you would even possibly think of. And one more thing that I also wanted to outline is obviously the explosion in the volumes of data that the financial sector is looking for today. I mean, every year banks are spending more and more budget onto acquiring more data, into integrating new feeds, which really means that the world is getting hungrier for data and hungrier for solutions that can help them feed that data into their systems and make business decisions.
Thank you both. I think you've surfaced quite a number of different trends, but I think what was particularly interesting to me is the democratization of data and coding, and the increased use of coding among a wider, I guess, set of people. But I guess for people tuning in who are no programming wizards to this live stream, what do you consider as the benefits, the main benefits of coding in financial services? Perhaps, Leo, you could start first.
Yeah, sure. So, well, I mean, you can look at languages just like any other natural or human language, like a foreign language. So the more languages you know, the more you know of different cultures. And as you learn those new grammar or grammatical rules, you you actually build out your way of, or new ways of thinking and looking at things. So I'd say that the objectivity with which you can judge different events and, build out your decisions are also different. So one of the benefits of learning programming languages, I would say, is just broadening the way you look at things that happen in this world. It's also the way that you can make more efficient decisions. And naturally, if we talk about it from a business perspective, if you know how to code, first of all, you're remaining competitive in the market. So today there is more and more demand for people who would know languages like Python, like JavaScript. It's all over the place. I mean, there is no way that I can launch YouTube without getting an advertisement of a job opening that requires Python coding skills or something of that sort. So yeah, and once again, if you know coding, that means that you can service your own needs at work, and that might help your employer to reduce costs, right? So instead of hiring somebody who is an expert at programming, if what you already know how to do is sufficient to address your daily routine needs, that is a very massive advantage nowadays. So
yeah,
I guess,
yeah, I mean, I think the thing is, coding has always been really important in financial markets. It's just the dynamic of the people who are able to harness the power of coding. So if we think about our customers, for many years, they've been working with our real-time infrastructures, distribution layers in C, Java, and other compiled, very fast languages, which are often have been the remit, with some exceptions, but often have been the remit of the professional developer. The emergence of languages such as Python, JavaScript, I guess, and HTML5, but really for the data science and quants and others, I guess, bankers who code or citizen coders, it's that which has meant that there's just a whole other slew of users who are able to really benefit from the power that compute brings you. Now, let's also remember this explosion in data. It is almost impossible to see the woods from the trees. There is just so much data that without a computer to identify correlations that a human would never be able to see, or to be able to, I mean, you can create in Python, back testing and machine learning modules in TensorFlow and things like that in less lines of code than I have fingers on my hand. It's amazing what you can do today compared to what you would really need to be a professional developer to do before. The other interesting thing about the syntax of things like Python is it's relatively readable. You can look at the code and you can see things like if statements, and you can almost read it like a language, Whereas if I look at, C, I can't read it. If I look at Java, if I look at Python rather, I can probably get a very good idea of what's going on with it. So I think, programming languages have always been really important, but now they are more accessible to the vast majority of financial market practitioners.
And I think you guys have actually touched on my next question already, which is really about what do you consider as some of the more commonly used programming languages in the financial services industry? And I think for the benefit of those who are tuning in from Asia Pacific, do you see any trend of some of these languages being more popular in Asia? And I guess why? Toby, I guess, maybe hand to you.
Well, Leo, let's go for you on this one, because I know you spent a reasonable amount of time in Singapore, and I'm not overly aware of any particular regional nuances, but you may be. So let's start with you on this one, and I'll pick it up after.
Well, it's actually a very good question. I would say that it's very hard to get this type of insights objectively because there are just so many sources out there. And I mean, if you look at Google Trends, for instance, right, you'll find out that some languages are a little bit more popular than others in some particular regions. But once again, we're just only shuffling the top 5 or top 10 back and forth. I mean, the top 5 languages pretty much everywhere are C++, .NET, and particularly C#, Java, JavaScript, and Python. Right, Python is the language that is definitely globally being adopted at a larger pace than the other languages. Right, I mean, if you compare it with the likes of Java or JavaScript, it's definitely one of the most wanted languages. Even though it's quite interesting that Python by far is not the fastest language to be executed, right? Which is why we would have the likes of Cython, which is basically a compilation tool of the Python language into a C-like into a C-like execution engine. So I would say that still a lot of companies, they do prefer to hire coders who know how to use Python, because for them the performance would not matter probably as much as it used to before, right? It's much easier to find and to support models that are written in Python that can be easily picked up by any other developer, right? I mean, if you are a developer and you have had prior I would say prior exposure to any programming language, so if you know things like variables or objects, so picking up Python is as easy as just like one day's work, right? So it's a very straightforward and quick exercise that you should be able to complete in no time. So that's my position on this.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of the things that I've really observed and love, because we show up really well in this space, is when you see new graduates hitting the desks of our customers, almost without exception, they've been coding before. Almost without exception. If they come from any kind of finance degree, macro and econometrics, engineering, mathematics. And so it's unusual to find a graduate on the desk who isn't already coding. And what we've often said, and it's not just us, all of the vendors have often said over the last, I guess, 10 years is, welcome to the world of the terminal. Welcome to learning the ISIN and the RIT code. Throw away all that stuff you spent learning over here and learn how to use this box over here. And now what we're able to say is, well, actually, why don't we come into your world? Instead of you coming into our world and learning the terminal and all these other applications, we'll bring the power of our content into Jupyter using Python, whatever it may be. And suddenly you've got an environment that you're completely au fait with using, with an agnostic means canvas to match and mix and stitch data sets together to drive insights. Now, as a graduate, I would think that would be extremely attractive and would really help you to hit the ground running. And we see that a lot. People are delighted with the kind of ease of use Python libraries that are available with our Refinitiv data platform.
Thank you. And I think that's a great insight for anyone on the lookout for jobs. I think that's something we always get a lot during these live streams. And I think it will be interesting to kind of compare what you guys have shared to the poll results later on. I guess it's just a final reminder to anyone tuning in that you can still complete the polling question, and I'll come back to this topic later on. But I think quite a few people actually mentioned that they don't code yet, but be quite interested in finding out how to get involved. And I think this is a question that I personally would be quite interested to really find out. What would be your top tips for anyone interested in picking up these technical skills, but not really knowing how to get started?
Leonid, go on that one. You're super proficient in this space.
Sure, no problem. Well, look, I mean, people differ, right? Some people are more tech savvy, I would say, and they are much better to adapt at learning new languages, whilst others are not. I mean, there are a lot of courses online. Some of them are free, and there are plenty of tutorial videos on resources like YouTube that you can watch. But the approach that is much closer to my heart, for instance, would be to to set a goal that sits within your own knowledge domain and try solve the problem that will help you achieve this goal using either Python or whichever language you would like to pick up. I mean, a lot of examples there are usually built around data analysis on some, either demographical figures or maybe something from biology, right, which might not necessarily resonate with people like me, for instance, right? I mean, I don't quite get how to apply some concepts if I don't understand the subject, right? So it's a lot easier for me to pick up, a topic surrounding pricing of instruments or working with time series of quotes and put that into a programming language and apply algorithms in that programming language on the data that I'm familiar with. That's really the way I would prefer to learn a language, and that's my suggestion.
I think that's a really, really good suggestion, Leonid. Sometimes there's a danger when you try to learn code dry without necessarily being really focused on the end state, i.e. I have a problem to solve. Is code a good way to solve that problem? If you just try and learn it, I'm going to learn variables, I'm going to learn loops, I'm going to learn cases, classes, objects, all of this stuff. Sometimes it's a bit less tangible. So to Leo's point, if you really focus on something you're trying to achieve in a subject matter that you're already a domain expert in, then I think it becomes much, much more tangible to actually work through that and to pick that knowledge up moving forwards. So I think that's a really good advice.
Yes, and if I may just add on that point, Toby, once again, a lot of things that are being taught about programming, they are, yes, you can see that they're quite theoretical, but it's all about the exercise and how often you get exposed to that exercise. I mean, if you solve a case with programming, say, like today, and you don't do anything for another 6 months, surely you'll forget everything that you've learned. Yeah. So it's also a matter of putting that back into practice, right? And don't worry about the code being rusty or anything. Nobody will ever judge you for not being proficient on day one. No, that's just against human nature. Programming is about algorithms. That's another thing that you need to keep in mind. So if you deliver a solution and you would like to revise it or refactor it at some point, then of course you might look for more optimal algorithms or more efficient algorithms that will really help you save time on the execution. That's something for you to consider as you evolve and as you upgrade your coding skills.
Thank you both. That's been quite helpful, I'm sure, for many on this live stream. And I think I picked up on what you mentioned, Toby, around coding not always being the most suitable, I think, tool as well for solving certain issues. And I think one thing I wanted to bring up is the use of Excel in workflow management. And I know that's not something that we'll see go away, but I thought I might ask, what other tools or methodologies would you suggest for anyone who is interested in better workflow management and I guess more in-depth data analysis that could perhaps replace or complement Excel? Leo, do you want to tackle this question first?
Yes, sure. And by answering this question, and there's no way that I would like to do any disservice to Microsoft. I mean, Excel is a wonderful tool, and I'm a heavy user myself. There is really no way that you can navigate away from it just yet, at least. So I guess one of the reasons why Excel became so popular and why people continue using it is that there is no ideal product, right? So when you do data analysis, depending on how you would like to structure it or look at that data, you will definitely need some bespoke view or bespoke, formulae. And Excel provides that very user-friendly UI that helps you augment it. But the problem of Excel is that it's very limited in terms of the dimensions that you can deal with, right? I mean, when you work within a spreadsheet, there is no way that you can scale up to multiple spreadsheets without eating up a lot of resources on your local machine. For that reason, of course, you could start using VBA, but once again, VBA is already a legacy technology, it's a legacy programming language, and there are other languages that are much more user-friendly, like Python in our case, which can be adopted. And once again, depending on what sort of data analytics problem you're trying to solve, you can add that multiple dimensionality to those solutions and really save time on processing data by working with arrays, especially multi-dimensional arrays in a program rather than the need to build out spreadsheets using Excel. So I would say if we talk about any alternative to Excel, and I'm not considering anything like Numbers or Google Sheets, it would be, well, probably any other IDE that supports the programming language of your choice, that supports a vast range of libraries that are adapted to work with numerical methods or quantitative methods. So Python is a very good example because it really has a large set of very mature libraries that can help you manipulate and transform data in pretty much any way you want, especially if you're into data science. I mean, that's probably couldn't have been a better choice.
Yeah, it's a good question, and I certainly don't foresee Excel not remaining a very prevalent tool in the markets. It's a blank canvas. Users really like it. It's very easy to pick it up from the offset. Having said that, it's great for some things and not great for other things. It isn't really great at dealing with vast amounts of data in a sheet. It does all of that locally using your local CPU and DLLs and so on and so forth. It's great as a display tool, and it's great for that kind of blank canvas, and it's great to be accessible to users, and the fact that it's probably on the desktops of the very vast majority of financial services participants. What I do foresee is Excel being used with other tools, such as things like Excel Wings, which enables Python and Excel to be used together, or other languages and Excel to be used together. So you could do your computation and your data calls away from Excel, but use Excel as an output. So I see perhaps more of a modification of the way that users use Excel, really playing towards the strengths of Excel, and then calling on the strengths of other things, such as development environments, such as Leonid's mentioned, for the compute and the data calls specifically.
Thank you. And I see some quite interesting questions coming in from the audience, and I wanted to pick one up, which is around highlighting any risks that are involved in using programming languages in financial services. Perhaps Toby, could I ask you that question first?
Yeah. Are there any risks above and beyond what users do today in Excel, for example? It is a really interesting question. There's no straight answer to it. So I guess the first answer to it is, yeah, there are definitely risks. You can make big mistakes very fast with code. So if you're, that's one of the things. You can compute data very fast and find answers very fast. But equally, if your code isn't right or if your algorithm isn't right, the answers you find could be producing very fast, very wrong answers, which is not what you want to do. So you do need to obviously have a degree of appropriate testing before you do that. Leo, what's your thoughts?
Well, I think that the risks are they're correlating directly with the level of skills of the person who is writing code using these programming languages. I mean, if you are overfitting a model that dictates your business decisions, then obviously you will be yielding a poor result eventually, right? So I think it's not the risk associated with the programming language itself, but about applying different concepts to within the languages. I guess that would be the main risk.
Yeah. And if we talk about risk, just to slightly flip that question, I consider there to be a lot more risk tied up in legacy Excel sheets that no one knows how to update or manage or maintain, which we see constantly. I mean, probably one of the biggest questions I've been asked by clients over the last 5 to 10 years is, how do we move away from our risk being managed on that PC under that desk there, that if someone pulls the plug out of, we don't know where our VAR is, or we don't know where our value at risk or the risk measures are. There's the risk. And the person who built the spreadsheet left the firm 5 years ago, and the person using it is too scared to touch it because they didn't build it and they're not quite sure how it works. And spreadsheet design becomes unwieldy and not optimized for Excel. So to flip the question, I think there's a challenge with risk within Excel, which can be mitigated to an extent with using code at appropriate times. Just for example, versioning with Excel, that whole kind of ops side of things, DevOps, that you don't always have with Excel, but you tend to have more with people who are more regimented and trained and used to using coding languages. So the processes around the life cycle of using code are perhaps a little bit more risk-free, or intended to be more risk-free than the rigor around Excel. Although there are tools out there which aim to help that.
Thank you. You're definitely giving me thoughts around my overusage of Excel as well in my own day-to-day work. I think one of the questions was around understanding how to gain access to quality data as a precondition to using code well as well. And I think that feeds in well to a question I actually had around this new cloud-hosted Python scripting environment that I think Refinitiv has just launched called Codebook. Would you both be able to introduce us to what Codebook is and what benefits could it really offer to financial services professionals? Leo, perhaps we could start with you for this question.
Sure. Yes, sure. Yeah, so we have launched Codebook just a couple of weeks ago, and this is a cloud-hosted Python environment that is integrated with our ecosystem of services. So what customers get access to normally is the set of APIs that we host in the cloud that can be used for different things, for retrieval of data, right? So things like the Icon Data API or Refinitiv Data Platform data APIs for real-time streaming, as well as quantitative analytics. Now, the purpose for Codebook was, first of all, to help customers omit the need to set anything up on their local machines. So if you have a web browser and you have access to one of our desktop terminals, whether that's Icon or Workspace, you can just log into the terminal and get access to the Codebook environment without the need to set anything up, even from either Safari or Google Chrome. On the other hand, we are collecting all APIs that we're working on in a single point. So you do not need to set up everything, all the APIs one by one, but you get a single point of access through a single Python interface, which we call the Refinitiv Data Platform Python library, that exposes all the different endpoints that you'd need in order to build Python applications, or even just simply to access different types of data that we carry on our system. So that's what Codebook initially is about. Toby, maybe you'd like to add anything from your thoughts about this as well?
I mean, aside from the fact I'm super excited by the launch of it, it's one of the things which I can't wait to get more reaction from customers on it. I think it both plays on and plays into the transformation that we see, that we touched on earlier, around the democratization of technology. The emergence of Python and the fact we leverage Python within Codebook means that we have this scripting environment which is much, much more accessible to end users. And equally, having that available will help people in the market, may not today be writing code, but may see other people around them doing it and may be interested in going on that journey. I think one of the really interesting things that we've done, and Leo can talk to this perhaps more eloquently, is around, it's so much more than just a development environment. It's fully integrated into our desktop. It has some really fantastic features above and beyond just a development environment. One of them being a tool called Code Creator. So in the same way as you may have created an Excel function in the past, you choose your companies and you choose your fields and your parameters, and it gives you an Excel function, and you click go and it pastes the function to Excel. Exactly the same workflow can now output Python code. So you can actually code without having to code. So I can select my instrument, select my field, it writes the code, I send it to code, but the code executes, and the next thing I know, I might start thinking about, well, if I can do that, then can I add those two things together or weight them and produce a basket? Or so for me, it's a real enabler. It's both enabled by and an enabler of this technology democracy, which I think we all find very exciting. It's a great tool.
Thank you so much for the introduction to Codebook, and I wish we had more time. I'm seeing a lot of questions coming in around resources available to learn more about coding and access to data, but unfortunately, I think we are coming to the end of our live stream. So I wanted to thank you both for taking the time to join us today, and to everyone else as well who tuned in. It's been, I think, a great session really talking about the importance of coding in financial services, the benefits that it can offer to financial sector professionals, and really the importance of democratization of technology and data, which is really at the heart of financial innovation. And I think I found it very interesting that the results of the poll has actually shown that 33% of the people who tuned in today still doesn't know how to code. So I think this is probably really food for thought for them as well, how to maybe get started. And I think for anyone else who would like to find out more about Codebook and coding in financial services, we're actually holding a webinar on the 11th of August around the same topic with Toby and Leonid as well joining. So I encourage you all to tune in if you can. I think we'll provide the link in the resources section after this session. And again, if you want to find out more about what we do and how to really get started in the development community, I encourage you all to reach out to us. So thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in, even if it's on a Friday. And I look forward to seeing you next at our next live stream. Thank you and take care.